At the lawyer's office, my father, Michael, pounded the desk, shouting, "It was a mistake." My mother, Susan, gasped dramatically, while my brother Jason sneered, certain the inheritance should be his. Then the video appeared my grandparents, Henry and Clara, the only family who ever truly loved me. "We leave everything to Emily." Their words cut the room silent. I clutched Henry's dog tags, stood, and walked out. "Before I open up about everything that led to that night, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt pushed aside or treated like you didn't belong in your own family? Drop a comment if this story hits close and tap the like button so more people who've been through it can find this. And if you want to follow the whole journey, don't forget to subscribe. I grew up in a house that sparkled on the outside but felt hollow on the inside. My father, Michael Harris, was a real estate developer who loved nothing more than seeing his name etched in glass towers across Dallas. My mother, Susan, floated through clients' homes like a queen, redesigning other people's living rooms until they looked like magazine covers. To the world, they were dazzling, untouchable, the golden couple who had it all. But behind our doors, I was just a shadow drifting through polished hallways. My brother Jason figured out the game before I even understood there was one. He wore our parents' love like a medal earned not through kindness but performance. New sneakers, the latest gadgets, perfect report cards. He learned early that approval was transactional. Dad's hand always rested on Jason's shoulder, heavy with pride. Mom's smile sparkled brightest when Jason showed off. And me, I was the quiet one sketching in notebooks. No one bothered to flip through sneaking library books into my backpack instead of designer shoes. I told myself I didn't care, but the truth is I did. I wanted warmth. I wanted a hug without conditions, a smile that didn't fade as soon as Jason walked in. I wanted to feel like a daughter, not just the other child living in their picture-perfect home. The first time I ran to my grandparents' ranch, I was 8. My parents' voices had turned sharp as knives, slicing through the air in another fight about debts. Jason turned up the TV, pretending the shouting wasn't happening. I grabbed my bike and pedaled, tears streaking my face, the handlebars slippery in my grip. I rode until my lungs burned and the ranch came into view. Henry was outside, sleeves rolled up, grease on his hands, leaning over a stubborn tractor. He looked up, saw me red-eyed, shaking, and didn't ask a single question. He just handed me a wrench. "Help me out, kiddo. Work clears the mind." We worked side by side until the sun slid low and turned the fields gold. My hands ached, my shirt stuck to my back, but I felt something I'd never felt at home needed. Clara called us in her voice, floating through the air like the smell of cornbread and barbecue. She didn't comment on my swollen eyes. She set a slice of pie in front of me, warm and sweet, and gave me something far better than pity a place at the table. That night, Henry told me how he built his trucking company from one beaten-down rig that coughed more than it ran. "A promise is like an engine," he said. "If you keep it tuned, it'll carry you farther than you ever thought possible." Clara tucked me into the guest room with sheets that smelled like lavender. Before she turned off the lamp, she whispered, "Independence, Emily. Don't let money own you. You own it." Those words became the armor I wore. When kids at school laughed at my faded jeans, I thought of Henry's weathered hands. When Jason flaunted a new phone, I remembered Clara coaxing vegetables from stubborn soil proof that patience could grow more than envy. The ranch became my refuge. Every creak of its wooden floors, every screen door slam, every Sunday neighbor dropping by for pie stitched something back together inside me. And with every visit, I understood more love wasn't about gifts or grand gestures. It was in a wrench handed to me without judgment, in pie served without questions, in the silence of two people who saw me without needing me to perform. By the time I was 18, the distance between me and my parents was a canyon. Dad tried to rope me into his business empire, dangling the promise of money and image. The thought made me sick. I'd seen what his empire did, how it hollowed out Jason, how it hardened my mother's smile until it cracked. So I enlisted in the army. My father scoffed, "You won't last a week in boots." My mother wept, "You're throwing your life away." Jason muttered, "Too naive." But Henry clasped my hand, eyes steady. "Good. Discipline and service. That's how you'll find yourself." The army was brutal. Sleepless nights, endless drills, missions where a single mistake could mean the difference between walking back or being carried back. But I thrived. For once, my effort mattered. My choices carried weight. I wore those dog tags against my skin like a tether to Henry's promise and Clara's wisdom: integrity, independence, heart. When I came home after a decade of service, Dallas looked the same, but felt smaller. I drove straight to the ranch. The screen door still clapped. The kitchen still smelled like pie and lavender soap. Clara's hug wrapped me in belonging. Henry's hand on my shoulder steadied me like a post driven deep into Texas soil. I didn't join my father's empire. I built my own. A modest security firm, family businesses, corner stores, churches. I recruited fellow veterans people who understood loyalty not because it was convenient, but because it had once been a matter of survival. Our work wasn't glamorous. We installed cameras, patrolled neighborhoods, fixed locks. But Henry was right. Security is trust. And I built my company on that principle. Most nights I fell asleep bone-tired, the good kind of tired. And I called Henry and Clara often. I told them about new clients, steady contracts, small wins that felt bigger than any glass tower my father could build. Henry would chuckle, "Keep your word, Em. That's worth more than dollars." Clara would fuss, "Eat, child. Don't live on coffee." I thought those calls were ordinary, just the rhythm of life. I didn't realize they were scaffolding holding me steady for a storm I couldn't yet see on the horizon. The morning the phone rang, the world collapsed without a single shot fired. My father's voice crackled through the line, thin and uneven words like "plane down" and "no survivors" splintering through the static. My pen slid from my hand. The floor seemed to tilt. I couldn't breathe. For a moment, I thought I was back in combat waiting for an explosion. But this wasn't war. This was worse. I drove to the ranch in a fog. The gravel crunching under my tires felt like it belonged to another lifetime. I half expected Henry to be out front with his sleeves rolled, Clara in the doorway with flour dusting her hands. Instead, the driveway was crowded with pickups, neighbors in dark clothes, the air heavy with disbelief. Inside, Susan sobbed theatrically into a silk handkerchief. Michael paced, muttering about legacy and responsibility like he was rehearsing a speech. Jason's eyes flicked around the room, restless, already calculating angles. I saw no grief in him, only hunger. The funeral came fast, the kind of quiet gathering Henry and Clara would have wanted. But it wasn't small. People poured in: truck drivers Henry had once bailed out of debt, farmers Clara had fed in lean years, families they'd carried when the world let them down. The church overflowed with stories. A man stood up and said, "Henry slipped me cash when my lights were about to be shut off." A woman whispered through tears, "Clara brought groceries when I had nothing." They weren't eulogies. They were receipts of love. I should have felt comfort, but instead a storm gathered inside me. Because while strangers remembered kindness, I could feel my parents circling like vultures' eyes sharpened by greed. Michael's whispers of assets continuity. Susan clutching someone's arm, sighing about what's left for the family. Jason's silence taut as a bowstring avoiding my eyes. And then Richard arrived from London, polished shoes clicking across the church floor, offering condolences that tasted like smoke. I told myself I was imagining things. That grief makes us suspicious. But deep down, I knew the truth. They weren't mourning. They were waiting. Days later, I found myself sitting in Thomas Reed's office, the lawyer who had handled Henry and Clara's affairs for decades. The room smelled of old leather and paper, the weight of secrets pressed into every shelf. My parents sat rigidly at the polished table, Jason leaning back with arms crossed, Richard smirking like a man who had already counted the money. I sat there with my heart pounding, wishing for a letter, a photograph, something small and personal from the two people who had loved me best. Thomas adjusted his glasses, voice steady. Henry and Clara updated their will 6 months ago. Their estate, the ranch, the trucking company, and a sum of $39 million will go to Emily Harris. Silence detonated. Michael slammed his palm against the table so hard the pen tray rattled. "She manipulated them," he shouted. Susan pressed a manicured hand to her chest, wailing, "Emily, how could you do this to us?" Jason leaned forward, his voice dripping with venom. "How often did you sneak out here whispering lies, turning them against us?" Richard's laugh was cold, A small-time soldier with a security firm holding a fortune like this unthinkable. We'll challenge it. Their words hit me like shrapnel, sharp and fast. I hadn't schemed. I hadn't begged. All I'd ever done was love Henry and Clara for who they were, not for what they had. And now that love was being twisted into a crime. Thomas lifted a hand. There's a video message. The screen flickered and suddenly there they were. Henry's lined face, Clara's soft eyes beside him. My throat closed. His voice filled the room steady as the fields he'd worked his whole life. We chose Emily because she has lived the values we hold dear. Honesty, independence, heart. Clara's voice followed tender but unyielding. She never treated us like a bank. She treated us as family. Michael, Susan, Jason, Richard, we love you. But we've watched. You borrowed, you promised, but never gave back. You chose greed. Emily will protect this legacy not for herself, but for the community. The video went black, leaving only the sound of my parents' fury echoing in the air. Michael's face turned purple. They were senile, manipulated. Jason shoved his chair back. Sign it over, Emily, or we'll ruin you. Richard leaned forward, voice sharp as glass. Divide it or this gets ugly. I felt my body trembling, but inside something snapped. Not in fear, no, in clarity. Every Sunday morning, cooking pancakes that went uneaten, every birthday forgotten, every hug withheld, every moment my brother was lifted up while I was erased, every ride to the ranch, every wrench Henry placed in my small hand, every pie Clara slid onto my plate without questions. It all came together into a single steel thought. Enough. I pressed Henry's dog tags in my pocket until the edges cut my palm. My voice shook, but the words were steady. No, this was their choice, and I'll honor it. The room erupted again, their threats swirling like smoke around me, but I'd already drawn my line. That night, back in my apartment, I sat on the floor with their photo in my lap. The grief was still raw, an open wound, but beneath it something harder was forming. My grandparents hadn't just left me money, they had left me a charge, a mission, and for the first time I understood that I couldn't keep playing the quiet outsider anymore. The breaking point wasn't their fury, it wasn't the will, it was me. It was the soldier inside me finally saying I'm done being the shadow in this family. I'll protect what they entrusted to me no matter the cost. And with that, the plan still silent, still forming, took root. The night after the will reading, I sat on my apartment floor with the glow of a single lamp. Their photo lay in front of me. Henry's steady eyes, Clara's soft smile. My body trembled, but not from fear, from resolve. I had spent my whole life being the quiet one, the overlooked one, the easy target. But Henry once told me, a storm doesn't announce itself, it gathers silently until it owns the sky. So I chose silence, not surrender. Silence as strategy. The first step was Thomas Reed, the lawyer my grandparents trusted. He wasn't just a man in a suit. He'd been in Henry's truck more times than I could count, sitting at the ranch table eating Clara's cornbread. He cared about more than billable hours. When I walked into his office the next morning, I didn't need to explain. He closed the door, set down his glasses, and said, I've been expecting their challenge. Let's build your defense before the first blow lands. Together, we combed through files. Loan records, unpaid debts, promissory notes where Michael borrowed and never repaid contracts, Jason signed and broke emails Richard sent, dripping with entitlement. Every page was a shard of truth, sharp enough to cut through the lies I knew were coming. We built binders, rows of them, organized airtight. Thomas labeled one of them The Shield. But I didn't stop with paperwork. I called Samuel the housekeeper who had served Henry and Clara for 20 years. He answered in a voice thick with grief. And when I asked if he would stand by me, he said, Miss Emily, they raised me as much as they raised you. I'll testify to the last breath. His words steadied me more than he could know. Next, I reached out to my comrades from the army. Rachel, who once dragged me out of a collapsed building. Tom, who could disassemble a rifle blindfolded and had a laugh that made war feel survivable. Louise, sharp-eyed, unshakable, who had promised on deployment. If you ever call, I'll come. I didn't need them to fight battles with guns this time. I needed their presence, their unflinching loyalty. Each of them answered with the same words. Where do you need me? Sheriff Lopez was last. He was an old friend of Henry's, a man who had eaten more than one late-night bowl of Clara's stew. When I explained what had happened, he didn't hesitate. They try storming the ranch, they'll be trespassing, and I'll be there before the dust settles. His badge wasn't just a shield, it was another piece of quiet armor. Meanwhile, I began fortifying the ranch. I moved back into the villa not because I wanted the luxury, but because it was the heart of what my grandparents had built. Walking through those halls, I brushed my hand over the wooden banister, traced the photos on the wall, breathed in the lingering scent of old books and lavender. It wasn't just property, it was memory, legacy, and now it was my duty to protect it. I upgraded the locks, installed new cameras, laid out patrol routes for my security team. The men and women I employed, mostly veterans, understood immediately. They didn't ask about the inheritance. They asked only, who are we protecting? And when I answered the Brooks legacy, they nodded like soldiers hearing their mission. Still, the nights were hard. I'd wake to phantom knocks convinced my family was at the gate. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, hearing Jason's threats echo in the silence. We'll ruin you. The world will think you're a fraud. My chest would tighten, but then I'd reach for Henry's dog tags on the nightstand, press them into my palm until the edges left marks. Pain became reassurance. They were still with me. I didn't fire back publicly. Not yet. When Michael called his voice smooth with poison, I let it roll to voicemail. When Susan left messages laced with tears, I saved them, time-stamped, documented. Jason's rants online, painting me as greedy and manipulative, I screenshotted every word. Richard's lawyers sent polished threats. Thomas filed them away, building the case brick by brick. Every insult, every accusation, every false story they threw into the world, I caught them quietly, stored them like ammunition, but I never engaged. Silence made them louder, and the louder they became, the more desperate they looked. One evening, sitting at Henry's old desk, I opened a leather journal I'd found in the drawer. Inside were his notes, routes, business strategies, but also words written like reminders to himself. Success is not loud, it's steady. Protect what matters and it will outlast the noise. That became my mantra. So I prepared not for a courtroom screaming match, not for a public spectacle, but for a war of patience. I gathered allies, strengthened defenses, and held fast to the values Henry and Clara had carved into me. And though the house was quiet, though the night pressed in heavy, I could feel it, the storm was gathering. Not theirs. Mine. The silence didn't last. At first, it was just calls my father, his voice clipped and dangerous. Emily, this belongs to the family. They were confused. Sign the company over and I'll make sure you're taken care of. When I refused, his tone hardened. Don't forget who raised you. Courts will bury you. Next came Susan. Her voicemails arrived like dripping water sweet at first, then suffocating. Don't you love us? We're drowning in debt. Just a small portion for your mother. I pressed the phone to my chest, hearing her tremble, but Clara's words echoed. Don't let emotions cloud principles. My reply was simple. I love you, Mom, but I won't betray them. Her silence after that felt colder than her accusations. Jason didn't bother with subtlety. He showed up at my apartment reeking of cologne fury in his eyes. You're sitting on $39 million while I scrape by. Hand it over and I'll make sure you're taken care of. My laugh came bitter. Taken care of Jason. This isn't about money. It's about trust. His jaw tightened. You'll regret this. I'll make the world believe you're a selfish fraud. And he tried. Within days, posts began spreading online. Photos of me in uniform twisted into captions about manipulation, claims that I had seduced Henry and Clara into disinheriting the rest of the family. Lies crafted with precision designed to cut deepest where strangers wouldn't question. My name trended not with honor, but with venom. Comments poured in, ungrateful soldier, gold digger in camouflage. How could she steal from her own family? Some nights I lay awake, the glow of my phone burning through the dark, scrolling through slander until my chest ached. For a moment, I almost believed them. Almost. Then I'd set the phone down and reach for Henry's dog tags, their cool weight dragging me back into truth. Richard's attacks came wrapped in silk. Legal letters from London, threats of endless litigation. Divide the estate, one email read, or my lawyers will make sure you drown in fees before you see a cent. Thomas only shook his head, sliding the papers into his binder labeled The Shield. Their noise doesn't change the law, he said calmly, but the pressure built. My security firm lost a contract when Jason's lies gained traction. A church elder hesitated to shake my hand, whispering, "Is it true, Emily?" "Did you take it all for yourself?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand in the street and shout the truth until my throat bled. But Henry's journal whispered back, "Success is not loud. Protect what matters." So I endured. I gathered screenshots, voicemails, copies of every false claim. Silence wasn't weakness, it was rope letting them tie their own noose. Then came the night at the ranch gate. The cameras buzzed to life, flooding my phone screen with headlights cutting through the Texas dark. 2 sleek cars rolled up doors, slamming in unison. Michael stormed forward first, his voice booming across the gravel. "Open up, Emily! You're squatting in our house, living on our money!" Susan's voice followed, wavering between pleading and rage. "Please, let's settle this as a family!" Jason rattled the iron bars, spit flying. Coward faces behind them. Richard adjusted his cufflinks, smirk sharp as a knife. My pulse hammered, but I stepped onto the porch. I wasn't alone. Thomas stood beside me, briefcase in hand. Sheriff Lopez leaned against his cruiser deputies, flanking him, the red and blue glow painting the night. Behind me, Rachel, Tom, and Louise, my comrades, folded their arms across their chests, silent and unyielding. Michael faltered at the sight, but pride pushed him forward. We moved inside the villa's living room, transformed into a battlefield of words. "This will is a sham," Michael barked. "She poisoned their minds. This fortune belongs to us." Jason shoved his phone in my face screen, glowing with his latest post. "Look, the world already thinks you're a thief. You'll lose in the court of opinion even if the law shields you." Richard smoothed his tie voice like a blade. "My lawyers are prepared. Years of lawsuits. You'll be bankrupt before this ends." Their words fired like bullets, each one aimed to wound. But I didn't flinch. Thomas's voice cut through the noise, calm and certain. "The will is airtight. Medical evaluations confirm Henry and Clara were of sound mind. The trust protects Emily's inheritance. Legally, you don't have a leg to stand on." Sheriff Lopez shifted his presence heavy as stone. "And if you try to force her out, you'll be charged trespassing, theft, maybe worse." For the first time, doubt flickered in their eyes. I stepped forward, heart pounding but steady. "This isn't about money. It never was. It's about trust. Henry and Clara saw your greed years ago. That's why they chose me." Jason lunged, finger-jabbing inches from my face. "You're nothing, Emily." "Wearing a uniform doesn't make you better." Rachel slid between us in an instant, her voice iron. "Back off!" Jason froze, his false bravado cracking. Susan tried once more, tears glistening. "We're your family. We'll lose everything without this." My throat ached, but Henry's words echoed. "Family means respect." I steadied my voice. "Family is more than blood. You shattered that when you chose greed over love." The dam broke. Michael hurled threats of lawsuits. Jason spewed curses promising to ruin my name. Richard sneered, whispering that I was too naive to last. Their fury filled the room like smoke, choking relentless. But I didn't choke. I let them rage until their own words revealed the truth. They weren't grieving children. They were thieves in mourning clothes. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't a battle I had to survive. This was a war I could win. The confrontation at the ranch should have broken me. Instead, it clarified everything. They weren't going to stop. If I kept waiting, they would keep circling, poisoning every corner of my life until nothing was left. So I struck first. Thomas and I spent nights poring over every scrap of evidence. Binders filled with loan records, Michael had hidden emails Susan sent begging for advances, Jason's screenshots of gambling debts, Richard's letters to London banks. proof undeniable that greed, not love, had eaten them alive. We packaged it carefully anonymized where needed, removing names of innocents, but leaving the truth sharp as glass. And then, with the same precision Henry once used to load a truck, we delivered it to a reporter Henry had trusted for decades. Within days, headlines bloomed across Dallas like wildfire. Real estate moguls mounting debts, buried by inheritance loss. Designer mother accused of misusing charity funds. Son's gambling addiction exposed after family fortune dispute. London investor pressured relatives for cash. The story shifted. Where Jason had painted me as greedy, the community now saw vultures circling a legacy meant for good. Public opinion turned like a tide. On social media, Jason's angry posts collapsed under the weight of truth. Sponsors dropped him, his followers mocked him. One even wrote you had everything and still begged for scraps. Shame. Michael's lawsuits crumbled as the courts received Thomas's airtight evidence. Judges dismissed motions before they reached the stand. Richard's lawyers in London quietly withdrew, unwilling to tie themselves to a sinking ship. And Susan, her tears no longer found sympathy. People whispered, she decorated mansions while her debts piled high. I didn't celebrate. Victory felt hollow. I still woke at night, heart racing, hearing their shouts echoing off the villa walls. My family wasn't gone, they were just exposed. And the exposure was colder than any courtroom battle. Then came the call. Late one night, my phone lit up. Susan's voice trembled through the line, softer than I'd ever heard it. Emily, please, forgive us. Just a little help. I pressed my forehead into my palm, tears burning behind my eyes. For a heartbeat, I was 8 again, wanting her arms around me, but Henry's voice steadied me. Family without respect is just blood. Prove you've changed, Mom, I whispered. Until then, I can't. The silence on the other end was heavier than any insult she'd ever thrown. Then the line went dead. For days afterward, I wandered the ranch feeling both victorious and broken. Protecting the legacy had cost me nearly every tie of blood I'd ever had. Yet I reminded myself Henry and Clara hadn't trusted me with their wealth. They had trusted me with their values. That trust demanded more than defense. It demanded growth. So I pushed forward. We launched the Henry and Clara Brooks Foundation, dedicated to veterans, farmers, and students who needed a hand. At the first scholarship ceremony, I stood at a podium, palms sweating, staring at a crowd of teachers' families and hopeful faces. My voice cracked at first, but steadied as I spoke. This isn't about money. It's about values, honesty, service, community. My grandparents lived these, and now we carry them forward. Applause thundered. I almost collapsed under the weight of it. Then a teenage girl approached me afterward, clutching an envelope with her scholarship letter. Her eyes brimmed with tears. Thank you. Because of this, I can go to college. Her voice trembled, but in it, I heard Clara's kindness, Henry's faith. In that moment, the echo came full circle. They had chosen me not because I was the most successful or the most charming or even the most deserving by the world's standards. They had chosen me because I understood what they had always known: integrity outlasts greed. As the girl walked away, sunlight spilling over the ranch fields, I realized something. My family had tried to bury me under lies, but all they'd done was clear the soil. Now, new life could grow, and in the laughter of children playing near the barns, in the pride of veterans who now had steady work, and the quiet thank yous whispered at the foundation's launch, I heard it. Henry's steady voice. Clara's soft laugh. You were right to walk away. The war had ended, not with explosions, but with silence. For the first time in months, the phone no longer buzzed with threats, lawyers no longer cluttered my doorstep, and the ranch gates stood quiet beneath the Texas sun. My parents and Jason retreated into shadows of their own making. Richard disappeared back to London, his name now whispered in shame rather than pride. But the silence wasn't empty, it was fertile. I poured myself into the work Henry and Clara had trusted me to carry forward. The trucking company, once proud but struggling, became my first battlefield of rebirth. I hired veterans who knew loyalty because it had once been the line between life and death. Men and women who had stood in sandstorms and firefights who understood that trust wasn't a slogan, it was survival. Together, we modernized the fleet, upgraded routes, cut waste, and built something lean but strong. Where Henry had started with one coughing truck, we now had convoys carrying goods across the state. Every contract signed wasn't just business, it was a promise I intended to keep. Drivers wore uniforms that carried not just a logo, but a legacy. The ranch blossomed too. We installed irrigation systems, turned fields' sustainable, coaxed stubborn soil into bounty again. Neighbors who had once thought of Brooks Ranch as a relic now came to learn from it. Clara's garden philosophy, patience, care, resilience spread like seeds on the wind. Children ran through rows of corn workers were paid fairly, and the land once more rang with laughter instead of argument. And then came the foundation. At the launch of the Henry and Clara Brooks Foundation, I stood before a crowd of teachers, veterans, single mothers, and young dreamers. My hands trembled at the podium, but when I looked out, I saw hope staring back. This legacy, I said, was never about wealth. It was about values, honesty, service, community. Henry and Clara lived these truths, and now we will carry them forward together. Applause erupted, not polite, but thunderous, rising to the rafters. Weeks later, a farmer stopped me at the grocery store pressing my hand until tears welled in his eyes. That loan you forgave through the foundation saved my land. My family thanks you. Another time, a young woman mailed me a photo of herself holding a scholarship award, her smile wide as the horizon. You made college possible, she wrote. Each moment was an echo of Henry and Clara's love, amplified and multiplied. But at night, the weight of it all pressed on me. I often walked to the oak tree at the edge of the ranch where their graves rested. I'd kneel the earth cool beneath my knees and speak softly into the branches. Henry, the trucks are running on time again. Clara, the garden's alive just like you wanted. And your foundation, it's already changing lives. The wind would rustle through the leaves carrying the scent of earth and promise. In those whispers, I felt them answering back. The $39 million had never been a gift, it was a test. And in losing my parents, my brother, my uncle, I had gained something greater clarity. Blood ties had crumbled under greed, but Chosen Ties Community Trust Service had become unbreakable. I was no longer Emily Harris, the overlooked daughter. I was Emily Harris, guardian of a legacy rooted in truth. Some evenings I sat on the porch of the villa, the Texas sky burning crimson and gold. The dog tags hung heavy in my hand, clinking softly, a reminder of battles fought and promises kept. I'd watch the horizon and whisper one promise into the dusk. I will protect this legacy always, for Henry, for Clara, for everyone who still believes integrity outlasts greed. And as the sun slipped away, leaving the ranch bathed in starlight, I felt peace, not the fragile kind that shatters with noise, but the kind built on foundations that will outlast me. Because family isn't defined by who shares your blood, it's defined by who shares your values. If you've ever had to walk away from people you thought were family, you know the pain and the freedom it brings. Tell me your story in the comments, I'll read them. And if this journey spoke to you, hit like, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe. Because the next story I tell might just echo your own.